friends and fellow world builders. My name is AJ Winters and welcome back to World Builder. Today we are diving into flora in the Trilands, specifically to Elswood, the new forest that we have made bordering the farming city and the river city. I am so excited for today's episode, so let's crack right into it. We're going to be making terrariums! Okay, I may have gone a touch overboard with this, but I'm very excited. Today we're going to build a little picturesque version of what Elswood looks like. So, I can't do that one-handed. Ta-da! I bought some stuff. We've got some plants that we can manipulate and change into what we need them to be. This one is from a fish tank, but I love the look of these little coral reef bits. These look really interesting and alien to me, so I want to manipulate them as well. Some more plants and different types of leaves to paint and to use, including these little fern-like features in these bouquets, and I love that. So I think maybe we'll dive into some prehistoric flora as well. Kind of like I am rewatching all of the Walking with Dinosaurs documentaries I used to watch as a kid. These little see-through leaves, I think they're craft leaves that you usually feature on a dress or something, but I love the idea of potentially making these glow in the dark. We got our different types of glue depending on what we need. We have craft glue and super glue, and yes, I will be safe with the super glue. Sorry, Mum. Kidding, there's no joke with that. I didn't super glue anything as a kid. We have some air hardening molding clay and of course some oil paints to paint the leaves today so that they don't look like they come from our world. They look very much unique to Elswood. Okay. Ooh. This is so delicate. We don't have a lot of time, so we're just speeding up the process. Also, this is a VS Sassoon ad. Okay. Some of those plants wilted in the heat. When he's in the terrarium though, he'll stand up. Okay, time for some paints. One thing I really want to play with the idea of is having Elswood not be the stereotypical green forests that you see everywhere. So I'd love to play with some more blues and reds, which means that this terrarium is going to change drastically when we start adding paint to it. So first off, I want to get a really deep red going, something that is unexpected. And then we want to go into our blues. Now this I think is already a magnificent blue color. Yes, it is. This sort of Prussian blue is my favorite to paint with, so I'd really love some blue colors in the forests as well. Then we have cerulean blue to add some features as well to the blue colors. Oh, that's just coming out as oil. Give us the blue. There we go. I'll get some greens up in here to mix as well. Let's start with our reds. I love the idea of these spiky balls being maybe poisonous or just, oh no. You know how I cut a little bit of super glue off earlier? I almost got my scissors stuck together. That was a mistake. I want to go with a deep red for that. So we'll add a little bit of black to it so it's a darker red. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a base layer of everything, and then I'll come back to show you guys the features later. But I want to discuss these plants and what we're going to do with them, especially this bad boy up the top here. He's kind of important. We've made him the feature of this terrarium, so what is so special about him? Are these little berries that we've created on his stem edible? Or is he a magical property plant? Does he offer something that these other plants can't, like healing properties or rejuvenation, maybe a youthfulness by eating this plant or putting it into your creams on your face? I like the idea that it's a plant of youth of some kind. Maybe it's a rarity in the forests of Elswood, that if you find it, is like finding the fountain of youth. It's kind of cool. I like that. We can have the other plants be a little bit more invasive in their root systems, which means that it sort of drives out the growth of this plant in the middle. That's why you see this aggressive terrarium happening, because all these plants around it are pushing this plant out of existence, and yet it still exists. I like this middle plant. He's going to be my favorite, I think. Apart from these little red spiky balls, which I love too. They're so sinister looking. The other thing we need to talk about is these berries on the side here. What are they? Are they edible? If we go with something poisonous for the red spiky balls, then maybe these brilliant berries back here are edible in some kind. I like the idea that they go really well with fish now that we've created those fish in the River City from Serum 7/6. A nice treat for the royalty or for the upper class potentially, as they are something that you need to go scavenging in Elswood for. Maybe they're very, very popular among the animals that live in Elswood, and therefore acquiring them becomes a little bit of a battle between you and the fauna around the place. Hunt or be hunted, or scavenge before the others scavenge. One thing we haven't really talked about, since we're talking about all the little foliage and stuff that grow around the forests, is that there's probably some big trees in Elswood. If we have the big horses and the horse herds like we talked about in the last episode, then we need some big trees to match. If we have big horses trampling through these forests, it would change the landscape significantly. It means that the tree roots can't grow on the surface level of the forest. It would need to be underneath. Potentially though, the further you get to the outskirts of the forest, as in not where these wild horses are, the more intertwined and tangled these roots would be. Perhaps that's also why these fungi, aggressive plants grow so heavily in the forest, is because they're shaded by enormous trees in the deep depths of Elswood. It would mean that they would struggle to survive or fight for their lives, which makes them aggressive plants. Another thing to consider is how far away the water is from this forest, from these plants. Because we have the River City, we know that there is water in the land and a lot of rainfall because of the rainfall in the mountain areas. But also maybe there's a couple of lakes or ponds in Elswood that you would need to go deep into the forest for, especially since the flora and fauna both need water to survive. Or unless these berries are what give them water or hydrate them. Because this is a fantasy world, we don't necessarily need to stick to earthly logic, so I'm going to say that most of the fauna eat up these ground plants around the tree roots because they're heavy in H2O, similar to a cactus. These are difficult to paint. Going by what we talked about last episode about the luminescent quality of the plants and the fauna in Elswood, I think that this particular forest would light up at nighttime. There's something glorious about reds and blues being brilliant and picturesque and still bright in the middle of the night, especially with the shade from those tall trees in Elswood. It would just be incredibly magical to walk through something that is so foreign and magical and overgrown, with vines of blue and these spiky red plants growing out among the trees at the bottom. Potentially there's a lot of mushrooms as well, which we have not got into. I might dive into that a little bit later with another craft episode. But I like the idea of fungi growing and edible luminescent plants everywhere. It would just be so picturesque. If anyone's an artist out there, please feel free to render something like that, because that is such a strong visual to me. And hopefully by the end of this painting session, this terrarium will look like a little capture of that moment. I'm going to continue painting on with this terrarium, and I'll show you the end results when we're done. If you liked what you're seeing with all this world building shenanigans, then follow all the socials and hit subscribe so you get notified for the next video that comes out. Next week we're going to dive into travel, how the citizens get around, especially now that we have some creatures to utilize for that as well, but also things like boats and carriages. I'm really excited. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you join our community as well. We have Patreon and we have Discord. But until then, I'll see you next week.